Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So I wanted to make this video to talk to you guys a little bit more about PTSD, continuing my discussion from the last video that I posted. Really in this video, I want to focus on how PTSD affects people who suffer from it, and their relationships, and how important it is to really get help. So I talked to you guys a little bit about symptoms that I had. I think I talked to you guys about panic attacks, and sleep disturbances, memory loss, things like that. So I wanted to go over like a longer list and like sort of summarize how that affects people with PTSD. So some of the things that I wrote down. Wait, before I get to this list. First thing that I want to say is that PTSD looks a little bit different for everybody, and it's a pretty broad category of behaviors. So it's like, don't take my word like as the law. Like if you don't, if this isn't your experience or the experience of someone or have heard of, that this is, I don't know what I'm talking about, or it's just doesn't match up with what you're familiar with. These kinds of behaviors can take a lot of different forms. And so I'm not going to speak like super specifically toward like this is what every single person has, but I will give you guys some more detailed information about like what it could qualify as, and then under that it's like it could take any number of forms. So things like anxiety attacks. Like for me, like I told you guys, I noticed it when I was in a car passing through an intersection. And I was having an anxiety attack of like, okay, this is new. Never had this before, this is weird. I used to have anxiety attacks like going to the grocery store, going to social gatherings, things like that. So it's like, it could take different forms for everybody, but that's a common thing. Having like a very flat mood constantly of just like, I don't laugh. I only smile when I'm forced to during pictures. I don't really enjoy myself very much ever. And it's the only other thing that I might feel throughout the course of a week or a month is anger, right? And this is like when my anxiety starts to flare up, then that's my usual response. And there's a reason for this, right? At least in my case, I recognize that in my training for going to Iraq and then again to Afghanistan, they really beat it into us quite rigorously, and I'm glad that they did, because it saved my life many times. Of like when it's a high stress situation, you shut down your emotional centers and you just focus on the job and what you need to do next and how do you accomplish the mission, right? And so, like for me, this is people shooting at you, this is bombs going off, this is a truck right in front of you or right behind you that's blowing up, or your truck that's blowing up, or like, RPG, or, windows are getting shot out or whatever it is, or an IED underneath the truck. And how do you respond to that, right? That is not the time to panic. That is not the time to look around and worry about how everybody else is doing and, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen next? You turn all of that off, and then you do your job, right? Which for me was calling in artillery, or calling in fixed wing or rotary wing aircraft. So like attack helicopters and fighter jets, or other assets. So, and then sometimes that's, loading ammo into the machine gun. Sometimes that's clearing houses. It could take it, like, that was my job, right, overseas. And so it's like, the bullets start flying, you're like, very objective in that moment. Okay, I'm getting shot at. Now I have to go run for cover, I have to return fire, we have to start bounding on the enemy, whatever it is. There's no room for fear or worry, right? You just do it. Now, in a deployment, that's very helpful. In a civilian application, it's not, okay? because I haven't had anyone shoot at me yet since I've been a civilian. It hasn't happened yet, right? I've had a couple of things where it's like, I'll be out. This happened to me last year, right? I was out at a park. My daughter is in daycare. And, well, like a play school class. She's in her class. I'm outside sitting on a park bench doing my homework. Then I see man and woman, at the street corner, this man's yelling at this woman and throwing all of her stuff like out of a car onto the curb. He starts pushing her, and then this like sets me off. I just left all my books, walked across the street, and I'm like, hey, what's going on here? Is everything okay? I'm like, get my phone out, like getting ready to call the police. And then this guy like backed off, booked it out of there, right? I just hung out with her. A couple other people were there too that walked over because they saw that, she looked like she was in a little bit of a threatening situation. That's like something like that. That's like probably the closest that I've had to any kind of physical altercation, right? There's a couple tense moments that I've had from time to time, but nothing same level of danger. Like nowadays, it's like if I'm getting stressed out, I'm at home or I'm on the job, I'm getting into a tense conversation with somebody, right? And that is not the time where it's like, your family needs you to be there for them emotionally, and that's stressful for you. So what do? Shut down your emotional centers and, stay as objective as possible, or whatever it is, or treat them like they're the threat, right? So it's not adaptive in civilian applications. But in any case, yeah, low affect, like just emotionally flat mood. Irrational worries and checking behaviors. This could take any number of forms, right? But like again, like it's a major inconvenience, right? It's a major inconvenience. Like you have the suspicion of like you're in danger, there's some kind of threat, or something's just not quite right, and it's uneasy for you. You can't relax until you check it to make sure that everything's fine, right? Then you go back and, well, it doesn't matter if it's just like checking your doors at your home, make sure they're all, closed or nobody's is standing around outside, everything is locked, are my weapons in the right place around the house where I left them, like, or whatever it is, right? Checking the windows, anyways, yeah, checking behaviors. And then hypervigilance, which kind of goes hand in hand with that thing too, but like just all the time. Like when I'm driving, I'm looking for like, are people following me on the road, or, I'm out, at a public function and everyone is out to get me. And so I'm just scanning the whole thing. Like I don't think I've been to a single event where I've really had just an awesome time. I had so much fun today, or I was able to relax today. Like I'm really only able to relax when I'm home alone or just with maybe 2 or 3 people as tops. 3 people's kind of pushing it. But like that's really the only time I'm able to relax, is kind of in one-on-one conversations. So like I really steer myself in that direction most of the time. Going out in crowds is stressful. It's very stressful. Okay, sleep disturbances. We talked about this last time, I think. Falling asleep, staying asleep, nightmares, sleepwalking, right? Things like that. Emotional triggers. So like I was telling you guys about like my RPG incident and like what that did to me afterwards, where it gave me all these triggers for flashbacks. So like something burning, right? That sulfury smell, like you light a match. That smell after you light that match would trigger me, send me right back there to getting blown up. Or like a light, like on the top of a building where there's like a street lamp turning on, or sometimes you go like these industrial parks and they have like lights shining down from the top of the building. Seeing those things turn on or flicker would, like, very stressful, just send me right back there of like, okay, I'm in immediate danger right now, this is what's gonna happen. And it wasn't the case. There can be other things too, where it's like things people say, or like categories of behavior. that could really set you off too. So it's not just like physical stuff or like, oh, I saw this thing and it triggered me, but it could be someone talking about something that relates to your trauma, right? Whether that's so and so made a bad decision, or so now I always look for this character trait, in people, and if I see it, like, it just reminds me of this guy who got these people killed, or or who died, whatever it is. So emotional triggers. All right, next one is memory loss. I talked to you guys about that already. That could take a lot of different forms in terms of how severe it is. Depressed mood is another one, and I said, like, it's important to make a distinction between like a PTSD symptom between PTSD and major depressive disorder. They're two separate things, but like in terms of covariance, like they happen together. The major depressive disorder is incredibly common with PTSD. So yeah. Next one is self-isolation. So this could be things like I said, like I enjoy being by myself and staying home. I don't enjoy, going out, and I don't enjoy parties. I don't enjoy social gatherings. I don't enjoy like meeting up with people that I know really well and just saying, hey, how you doing? I want to stay away from all the things that trigger my anxiety, right? And so like I'm also talking about avoidance behaviors here, which is a huge part of PTSD. So I avoid, sometimes at great cost, I avoid talking about my military service. Usually if just like some random person, sometimes people introduce me, they're like, oh, this is so-and-so and he was in the army. And then people would get very interested. Oh, were you in Iraq? Yes, I was. Were you in Afghanistan? Yes, I was. What did you do? Oh, nothing exciting. Right? I don't really have anything to talk about. What was that like for you? Oh, everyone's experience is different, right? Like, I just don't want to talk about it. Like, I avoid talking about it because it's stressful for me to talk about it. And I feel like, I don't know, that's something that I've touched on, I think, in another video of like, people are usually pretty innocent when they're asking these kind of questions. They don't really think about the impact that it has on the people who have to live with this kind of trauma. What their experience was like, but I don't wear a t-shirt or a badge or anything that says, I have PTSD, and, ask me if it's okay for us to talk about certain things, right? So it's like, I can't blame other people for this, right? It just happens. So yeah, avoidance behaviors are a big thing. I don't like to go out in public. I try to stay home as much as I can. I try to stay away from people as much as I can. Even when I'm meeting up with friends, I try to really only meet up with one person at a time, right? Because it's way more comfortable for me to do that than it is for me to get out there and expose myself to things that cause me anxiety. Okay, flashbacks we talked about a little bit with the triggers. But the key thing about flashbacks is that you feel like you are in that moment of when your life was in danger, right? Or your physical well-being was in danger, right? It brings you right back to that moment. So that's a key distinction. And it's like with that, there's the emotional distress and the physiological responses of like the elevated heart rate and, the rapid breathing or whatever it is that go along with that. Okay, loss of appetite or overeating is another thing. So like when I was in Iraq, I was overeating big time. Let's see, before I deployed, I was 260 pounds. When I got like at the end of my deployment, I was like pretty close to like 350 pounds. Like I was massive, right? And when I got back, like a lot of people, I think that they knew that I wasn't coping very well, right? Especially because I'm such a quiet guy and I don't talk about anything. And I think this has a reason, like a big part to play in why I've struggled so much with a lot of my anxiety and like things related to my trauma is that like even when I was deployed, like we'd go through something. There'd be like a firefight, or somebody got hurt or whatever it is. Usually, like, you don't really sleep very much that night because you're up talking about it and decompressing, and that was not me. I never talked about it ever. Whatever part to play that I had in it. If I heard people mention, who was it that did that thing, I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, that was me, right? Or whatever it is. If I heard them retelling the story, I would never jump in, ever, right? I just sit down and keep to myself and, read a book or, draw a picture or something like that. And I never talked about it, even when I was deployed, never spoke about it. So, like, I feel that people around me knew that I wasn't coping very well, and they saw that I was gaining all this weight. And, a lot of my, direct leadership, like staff sergeants or whatever, were coming to me and they were just like, listen, like, we're all having a hard time with this. When we get back in garrison, it's totally different rules. We don't want you getting in trouble for this thing, like, because you're having a hard enough time already, right? We don't want this turning into like, me getting Article 15s and, counselings and stuff like that. Counseling is like in the military context is like a reprimand, right? Don't think of counselings as like going to see a therapist. Like in civilians, you hear the word counselings, you think of like you're going to see a therapist, but it's a reprimand in the military. So they're like, okay, we don't want you to get counseling. We don't want you getting Article 15 or whatever because your weight or because of your fitness, you can't pass your tape test, so they're just like, please just start working on this. Let's not turn it into a thing. I was able to do that, by the way. I lost a ton of weight. I went all the way down to 230 pounds, something like that, in about a year. I had lost all of that weight and then some. I was even in better shape than what I was, because that was how I was able to cope, was through exercise, was after that of just like, okay, I'm not sitting around all day eating and, being depressed. Now I'm just gonna channel all of my aggression and I'm gonna channel all of my anxiety into this task. And, I was super, super fit coming back from Iraq. So yeah, but it's a thing, right? Overeating or undereating. Guilt and anger. So the guilt is just all the time. The anger usually comes in response to anxiety. If someone triggers my anxiety, I'm fuming mad, fuming mad. And I can be angry for weeks at a time. There are things that I've been angry about for months, just angry. And I don't talk about it, right? I'm, like a tea kettle that's just got the lid on and it's just shaking and the steam is coming out. Like, that's me, right? That would be me. So like this happens. It's a regular thing. Sometimes people with their anger, they can have like a violent temper. Either I get into an argument and I'm upset that I'm gonna hurt somebody, so I just leave. I just walk right out of the room. Who knows when I'm coming back? People getting into, like, someone says the wrong thing in the grocery store, you're getting into a fist fight, right? At the grocery store, or road rage, right? To the extreme of like, I'm gonna follow this person and, I'm gonna hurt them. It happens, right? That wasn't necessarily my experience, but it's not unfamiliar to me in terms of people that I knew, especially right after Iraq. I knew tons of people who were going out, and this was a huge problem, right, when I was in Alaska. All right, so this one, I don't know what the official terminology is for it, but it's like daydreaming. So I want you to imagine it's just like, here I am, I'm sitting at home, I have, my wife and a friend are over, and they're talking, I'm sitting in on the conversation, I'm joining in from time to time. And then mid-conversation, I'm just checked out, I'm just gone. Like, my mind is just back at another point in time, right? I'm just not there. Or instead of like me being trapped sort of in this flashbulb memory of a kind of a moment. I'm just dead in the eyes, and I'm gone, just vacant, right, in my attention. And then usually somebody have to pull me back of like, hey, is everything okay? Where'd you go, right? I don't know what that's called, but like it happens when I'm home. It happens when I'm out and about. It happens when I'm driving sometimes, where I'm just checked out, just gone, right? So that does happen too. And then the last one that I have written down is suicidal ideation, which is more on the extreme end, but like I feel like in the last 6-7 years, death rates, suicide rates amongst combat veterans, or just military veterans in general, have been going up and up. So like it's a huge deal. It's affecting tons and tons of people, you know, in the military, especially in the U.S. So when we look at all these things combined, you know, it's easy to see how this is very distressing for the individual who's suffering through this throughout the course of their day. It gets hard to enjoy your life. It gets hard to have friends. It gets hard to be around people. It gets harder. You don't want to drive anywhere. You don't want to go to the store. You don't want to be in crowds. You certainly don't want to do anything fun. And even if you tried to do fun things, it's not fun to you anymore. You know, you get into more, you know, physical altercations or more arguments with people in your life, no matter how close they are to you. And then slowly you just start pushing everyone away. You start shutting down. You're more and more angry. You're more and more depressed. And then, you know, unfortunately it happens that, you know, people are pushed to that extreme of suicide even. So this can have a huge, huge impact on the life of people who are suffering through it. And to that end, like, it's really important to get help. I was telling you guys in the last video that I really dragged my feet on getting help because I felt that I didn't deserve it, right? I didn't deserve the help. Partly, like, I did feel, I had, like, part of that is driven by guilt. And then the other part of that is I didn't think that my symptoms were so extreme, like I really couldn't see how it was affecting me. Partly because I just wasn't getting any feedback from anybody else. And as much as I was going to doctors to talk about my symptoms, and I didn't say that I had PTSD, right, ever. They're trying to write it off as something else other than what it was. Which in my mind meant it's not PTSD, and I shouldn't worry about it, right? And for all the resources out there for people to get, you know, services and help for their you know, anxiety disorders or stress disorders or whatever it is, I should save those resources for those people who really, really need it, and I didn't feel like I qualified, right? But clearly I did. Yeah, for me, I think it's important that, like, it's been very helpful for me to have, you know, regularity of, you know, a schedule or people checking in with me from time to time to see how I'm doing. Even though, like, for years and years, I was that person that never reached out to anybody and always kept to myself. And I would wonder about people from time to time and think about them, you know. But that was it. Like, I wouldn't reach out to them. I wouldn't try to maintain any of my relationships until more and more, you know, there are no relationships left, more or less. So, you know, it's important to get help and to not talk yourself out of getting help, right? Even if you think something's wrong, right? But like you're not sure, see somebody about it. It's really important, right? You deserve it. Our veterans, our first line responders, emergency services, they deserve this, right? I think it's important to recognize it's just like we give veterans so much respect, partly because the uniformed services are the only job in the world where you can be ordered to die, right? And it's like, that's not a small thing. It's a totally different relationship with that occupation than you have with other occupations that are just as important, if not, a little bit more important on a day-to-day basis. So it's like teachers, right? I can't imagine living in a society with no teachers. It's an immensely important job, right? I couldn't imagine that, right? I think all of us as adults at some point have imagined a world without war, which means imagining a world without militaries, right? You can sort of think of this kind of utopia of like, wouldn't that be nice if we all just got along, right? But you couldn't imagine a job. You couldn't imagine living in a society where there are no teachers, right? You could probably imagine a society where there are no doctors, but you would definitely not ever want to live there, right? That's, again, immensely important job, right? But the difference is that soldier, that veteran, that police officer is out there risking their life, right? And dying on the job, right? Where most of the time, like there's isolated cases or like certain cases of atypical attacks in workplaces, right? Like it's school shootings or whatever it is, where teachers are dying, right? But that's not a part of the job, right? There's no school principal going to a teacher and be like, sacrifice yourself, right? I know that you're gonna die if you go through that door, but that door, like you have to protect it, right? Whatever it is, like you're not seeing that with any other occupation. And so if your life is on the line, or you're constantly like it's expected that you're gonna risk your own life, or you're gonna be hurt or dismembered or blinded, or it's expected that you're gonna see other people die or see other people get serious bodily harm. If we know that that comes with the job, then we should be giving these people as many services for their mental health as possible. We should be taking mental health just as seriously, if not more seriously, as a physical injury, them being wounded, right? Like you lost an arm, right? I've read this quote in this book by Wayne Federation. It's called PTSD. A really cool book. I think it's Poems That Spark Discussion. I think that's what it's called, by Wayne Federation. Check it out. On the back of the book, it's got this line. Where's that book? Do I have it here? I have it somewhere in the house, but where the author is saying like, I wish that I did lose a limb, because then people would understand. They'd understand where this pain was coming from, right? And so it's like, it's so true. Like that really resonates with me. I wish there was something physically wrong with me, so that when you look at me on the outside, you realize why I'm not okay, right? But because it's like I'm not physically hurt, you don't really see it. Because you're not around me all the time, you don't see how all of my relationships and all of my life is being impacted by this thing, right? With our veterans, our emergency services, all uniform services, they deserve this help and this attention, right? And we should be giving them as much support as possible. Now, with that, I do want to say that I'm really grateful that I've had people in my life who've been able to support me or just stick with me, while I truly try to navigate this. And I know, I feel like every time I start to get help, I have this voice in my head that's just like, you don't deserve it, right? And save it for the people who really need it the most. And I always try to talk myself out of it. And now I'm getting better at recognizing, my symptoms and my triggers, and coping and finding the new normal, with things. But it's a struggle. It's a daily struggle. And the people around me, they don't always see it, right? And this is for all people out there who have this, mental health stuff. You don't always see it. Sometimes you don't see it till it's too late, right? When I was in Alaska, right, we had, someone we're very close with, try to commit suicide after they came back from Iraq. And he made it. Like one of his friends, his roommate, saved his life. But like after it happened, everyone was like, wow, no one saw it coming, right? We never would have expected it. Never. He never talked about it, never alluded to it. We all thought we were in the same boat, right? and not just that, we all thought that after everything we had been through together, right? And if you're a civilian, you might have a friend that you've known for years of your life, and you guys disclose pretty intimate information with other people, with this good friend of yours. But it's absolutely nothing like the relationship that veterans have with one another, right? I meet veterans who, were in the military years before I was in the military, right? I had veterans who were enlisting when I was still a baby, right? And they got out before I got out, right? Or they got out after I got out, or they served for a different country, or we had nothing to do with each other, right? But as soon as I meet them, it's like there's a bond there, right? Because we shared an experience that was so similar, that's specifically related towards danger and violence, right? And the loss of life. And if you go through an experience like that, of like, oh, I almost lost my life and you were there with me, or I helped you, or I know what it's like because I was in the same situation, those friendships are immensely stronger, right? Just not even the friendship, but just that connection that you feel with those people are immensely stronger than anything that people outside of that context can really even fathom. And or even just like being willing to die for someone, right? I was just sitting and think about that for a second. Like, what would that take, right? Like, if you could probably, like, if you're a parent, at some point you're probably like, yeah, I would definitely give my life to save my child's life, right? Or, someone in your family that you really love, right? Like a parent or a sibling, maybe, younger kids in your family. Yeah, if you really sit and think about it, you could probably find someone that you could think of, like, okay, it's a struggle, right? like I could find somebody, but I'd have to think pretty hard. Or maybe it's only one person, or just a couple of people. But could you imagine, like, in my unit of like just a couple hundred of us, like, you'd be willing to die for every single person there, right? Could you imagine that? Like, could you imagine, just random strangers out on the road, you see they're in danger, and you're willing to go put your life on your line to save someone you don't even know, right? Having that kind of mindset, right? It's totally, totally different. I don't know how often, like, you think about that. Like, if you're a civilian, and you think, like, how often do you ever think about that? It's totally different, right? But it's just like, when we were, like, after our friend had this incident where he had a failed suicide attempt, everyone was like, after everything we've been through together, after we risked our lives for one another, after we knew so many people, like my first deployment in our unit, 19 people died, right? Killed in action, 19. That's a very high number, right? Very high number. I think at the time it was the highest number that the Army had seen in a deployment. 19 people didn't come home in that year, right? We're like, after everything, you could not talk to us, right? I can understand you don't want to talk to your family about this, because I don't want to talk to my family about a lot of stuff I saw, right? I can understand you don't want to go see, a psychologist, right? Because there's stigma, and you're going to ask for the time off work, and people are going to give you a hard time or whatever, maybe not, right? But, like, I could get it. I could understand if you didn't want to talk to a psychologist. But if you don't want to talk to the people who are there with you, how could you not, like, how is that possible, right? And we didn't see that coming, right? In the civilian world, it's just like everyone's in it for themselves, it feels like. You got your life, you have your own schedule. You're not spending a lot of time focusing on, I wonder what kind of day my friend is having, right? Or checking in with them because you have so much, care and concern for them. But it's just like, like sometimes you don't see it until it's too late, right? So anyways, I appreciate those people who really stuck by me and who encouraged me relentlessly to get help, right? Giving me resources, or giving me space to talk, even though I didn't really talk about it, giving me that opportunity to talk, and not be judgmental, or not make me feel like something was wrong with me or anything like that. I really appreciate that. In any case, I think that's the end of my talk for today. This is like a long journal entry, huh? Me talking about PTSD stuff. Sometimes I feel like this is the only thing I ever talk about, but I don't know. I'll get to it. I gotta talk about this at some point. You know, it's important. But yeah, thank you guys so much for sticking in there with me. I have the next video that I want to do. I got 2 more videos on my list right now. One is on quarantine life, and then the other is about transitioning out of the military. So one of those is coming up next. I don't know which one I'm going to do, but thank you guys so much for sticking with me. If you guys want to talk or want me to talk more, maybe one-on-one, then about mental health related stuff, or you know what your journey was like, or you know what can I do to get more help, then you feel free to reach out to me, you know, online. I'm always here for people. Like if you need help, I'm here to help. But you can contact me on social media, my Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can contact me through my website, even my daydreaming.ca. Even that's for my business, but it's like, if you know, not everybody's on social media, so if you want to get in touch with me, then you guys can do that. Go on daydreaming.ca, and then you can find my contact info there. But I'll put the links for all my contact info in the description to this video. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys soon.